Hello, and welcome to another edition of BNEWS In Depth. I'm your host, Rich Hosford. I'm standing outside the Middlesex House of Corrections, so this month we are talking about efforts to keep people out of there. There's been a push in Massachusetts, and specifically Middlesex County, in the last few years to start treating addiction as a disease and those suffering from it as patients, rather than all drug use as criminal perpetrated by criminals. We'll be talking to three people on the front line of this effort. State Senator Cindy Freedman, who recently filed a bill to stop the practice of incarcerating people in the legal system who suffer from a relapse in their drug use. Middlesex County Sheriff Peter Koutoujian about his office efforts to keep people out of the legal system and get them the treatment they deserve and to treat them if they fall into it. And State Rep Ken Gordon about the overall push in this new line of thinking. It's an important topic that affects many individuals and their families, so let's get started. I'm now joined by State Senator Cindy Freedman to talk about her bill, S937. And we'll get into the details, but first of all, thank you for coming in. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So this bill, is aimed at, trying to help people in recovery who have, ongoing criminal issues, but the goal is to keep them in recovery. Tell us kind of how it works.
Well, they don't necessarily have ongoing criminal issues,
Okay.
but they have intersected with the judicial system because they have a substance use disorder. And this bill, treatment non-imprisonment, would allow for somebody who is in a certified recovery program and who relapsed to not have that go against their pretrial or probation status, as long as they remained in treatment and they continued with their, with the course of treatment that they're on.
Right. So just because they have an incident where they go back to
Correct.
using, it doesn't automatically
It doesn't automatically kick in that you have violated the conditions of your parole or your probation, and so the judge could order you to jail.
And how did this bill come about? Was there a specific case that inspired it?
So there was the Eldred case, and I was contacted by a lawyer, Lisa Polk-Newman, who had a client who actually was in treatment, did relapse, actually told her treatment program that she did relapse. The treatment program told the judge, and the judge ordered her to jail because she broke the conditions of her parole. And this went to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, and the Massachusetts Supreme Court basically said there's nothing in law that prohibits a judge from using this kind of action. And so she came to me along with several other advocates and said, we'd like to do something about this. And because of my background in mental health, substance use, and recovery, I was very interested. And so we worked together, and there was we developed a bill, and I filed the bill in the Senate.
And where does it stand now?
It has had a hearing, and now it's still in the Judiciary Committee.
Okay, so it's still in the process right now. So I think it's important for people to kind of understand, because I think, I think sentiments are changing, but, there's old sort of thinking of like, well, if somebody is on probation and they're ordered not to use drugs, just don't do it. But talk about how, the science of, or the medical profession views recovery, the process of recovery, and how relapses are almost kind of, understood to be baked into it.
So it is true that relapse is often a part of recovery, that it takes several iterations in order for somebody to meet their recovery goals, which is to be abstinent for a long period of time. It is not uncommon, and is often expected that people will or may relapse. So it's part of the recovery process. And to deny somebody their freedom to prevent them from getting treatment because they're in treatment, following the course of their treatment, doesn't make sense. Now, if somebody has committed a crime, a serious crime or crime, and that this would not relieve them of that crime, it would just say that relapse, when you are in a true recovery program, can't be a condition of jail or incarceration.
Yeah, it doesn't expel them from, or protect them from, consequences or other things, just specifically for their own.
There are an awful lot of people who have done very minor infractions who end up in the criminal justice system. I mean, over half of the people in both our DOC and houses of correction have a substance use disorder or a mental health condition, mental illness. And a third of the calls that 911 gets are from people who are having some kind of very serious behavioral health issue. So we have an awful lot of people who were addressing treatment with criminalization, and we need to stop that. We would do that with any other illness.
Right, that's a good way to put, I think, illness, not necessarily criminality. Talk about overall how, this is a part of, an effort to kind of address the opioid crisis.
Sure. The opioid, this is something that we've been working very hard at as a Commonwealth to address this, and we have a lot to do. We need to increase access to quality treatment programs, and the evidence is out there, and it's saying when you have an evidence-based, evidence-informed treatment program for people with a substance use disorder, it works. You can recover. It's not easy. It can often be a long process, but it is doable, and good programs that are evidence-based have shown that. So we need to increase access to those programs. We need to make sure that people are in the right program for them at the right time and when they need it. While we're doing that, we need to ensure that people remain safe, that we reduce harm. And some of the things we can do around reducing harm is to increase access to safe needles. We can ensure that there's Narcan. We can make sure that people have an ability to test their drugs for things in it that would cause even greater harm, like fentanyl or carfentanil. And I am somebody who believes very strongly that we should have safe injection sites.
Oh, okay.
And we need to continue our prevention. We need to continue our education. So we need to do all of those things at the same time, because this is a multi-pronged problem, and we have to address it from all different angles. So I think those are the things that we need to do, but this is a piece of it. We can't incarcerate people because they are ill, and we're still doing that. And I think it's very important that we stop doing that, and this is a piece of doing that. This bill is a piece of doing that work, because it is an illness, and we have to work very hard on stigma and reducing the stigma, because there's a lot of people suffering out there, a lot of families suffering out there. They're alone, they're ashamed. There are still people who think it's a moral failing if you have a substance use disorder, and they treat people as such, and we have to address those issues so people can get the help they need when they need it.
Yeah, I think that the stigma thing is a big part of it. I think also there's a kind of an evolving understanding that, opioid use is not sort of like limited to sort of a character that people have in their heads. It's, people's mothers and grandmothers and fathers.
Yeah. And it has definitely been linked to a gene and to trauma. So when you have one or another of those things, you're more susceptible, and if you have both of them, you're even more susceptible. So we've pinpointed how this comes about and why some people are very sensitive to this and why other people are not. But it's not just opioids. we can't forget that. Fentanyls now are the number one issue in drugs. We're seeing methamphetamine is coming. It's coming to our cities and towns, which it hasn't been a major factor, and now it is. And alcohol. Alcohol. Substance use disorder with alcohol is still the number one substance use disorder by far.
Right.
And so we have work to do on all of these in all of these areas.
Now, you're talking about the recovery process and how people need to be in an environment that is conducive to healing and to help. Talk about the current practice and just even if it's recovery, not recovery, but how much extra of a obstacle being incarcerated is to actual getting good treatment.
Well, I was responsible on the Senate side for a bill last year, an opioid bill, where we require the houses of corrections to continue medication-assisted treatment for people who come in, if they come in with a prescription. And so we're doing some work on making sure that people who are getting medication-assisted treatment continue that if they're incarcerated, which is really important. We also, on the DOC, have done some work to help people through a medical detox, which can take a couple months, and then when they are ready to be released, a couple of months before they're released, they will be evaluated, and if they need to start a medication-assisted treatment, they will, that is open to them. But that's just one part of the problem, and I don't think yet that we have in place what we need, especially in the DOC, in the Department of Corrections, to help to treat people who have this illness.
Right.
And I think we have a long way to go. First of all, people shouldn't be in there because of their illness. And secondly, if they are there and they have a substance use disorder, we need to get a lot more serious about treating people. And corrections needs to be about corrections, not just penalizing people.
Right.
Because we're just creating a class that just will continue to recidivate, and we won't be helping. We're not helping. And if we don't, not only is it morally right to help people in this situation, but it's to the benefit of the community. If you give people the support and the resources that they need to get better and to live lives where they can function and be part of their communities, we are all better off for that. We are all safer, and we have a more engaged and prosperous community. So this is why it's so important that we take this seriously, and we need to require more from all of us to address this issue.
Now, I know this bill doesn't address this issue particularly, but it seems to be in the general thrust, is the idea that would you have a preference to have people who get arrested and charged and convicted on drug charges not to have to report that later? There's that movement to stop checking the box. It's like, yes, I have a previous felony, just because prevents people from getting jobs after they get out, and then maybe that will also prevent them from having the basis for a recovery that they need.
I mean, there's nuance in there.
Yeah. Okay.
I fundamentally believe that we've gone overboard with Corey's. I believe that what we're becoming is a society where if you mess up, you sort of get messed up for life.
Right.
Because so many things we do in so many ways where, say, we check a Corey, and I don't know what happened with time served and you've paid your debt and now you can, I understand for certain crimes that and certain jobs it's an important thing
absolutely.
to know. But I think we've really gone overboard with a lot of this, and I know that there are a lot of young people who do things that they don't rise to the level of serious criminal activity, that they're young, that they're stupid, or that they did something stupid, or they're younger and they have a substance use disorder and they end up in the criminal justice system, and that follows them around forever. And that is not a good situation, because when you're doing that, you're just taking away any impetus for people to get better. How do you get out of that cycle of being treated like a criminal? And so I think we really need to seriously look at our whole quarry system and what it's doing to people, and is it really keeping us safer? I'm beginning to think it's not.
Right. Especially for something where it's drug related and you're not actually harming other people. Just
and you used.
Right.
You basically used, and
you had mentioned access to clean needles and safe injection sites. How would you see that working, and what are some of the obstacles that would have to be overcome? I guess both for the law and somewhat for the court of public opinion as well.
We do safe needle exchanges now in the Commonwealth. They're very, very successful. They do keep people healthier when they have access to clean needles. This is especially an issue because fentanyl is so much more powerful than heroin, but it doesn't last as long, and so you use a lot. So what we're beginning to see is increases in HIV, in blood-borne diseases, heart diseases that are caused because of unclean needle use.
Right.
So one of the things we have done is put money into the budget to increase access to safe needle exchanges, and that's to safe needles. Where you bring in your old needles or you're used, and you can find a place to get clean ones, and that's very important, and it's very successful. And nobody knows it's happening, so it hasn't changed the world. Right. But it's happening, and it happens in a lot of places. Not enough, but in different places. I see safe consumption sites or safe injection sites as an extension of that, and that would be a place where someone could go and use with oversight from a medical professional who would make sure that their paraphernalia is clean, that the environment is clean, that if they begin to overdose, there's somebody there that can help them, they can observe them, they can create relationships with them. And it turns out that one of the clearest ways of getting people into treatment is through relationship.
Right.
That when you trust somebody and you begin to listen to them, and when you can listen to them, then you start to maybe think about a different path, and you have that support. But that takes a lot. It takes usually 12 interfacing, 12 times interactions before that, before sort of that trust is developed. So I believe that if we're very serious about addressing substance use disorder and the crisis that we need to have every tool in the toolbox, and there has to be many doors to treatment. And to me, safe consumption sites is one of those tools. It is used in other countries. It is successful. It is clear that it does not increase drug use in any way. It is clear that it does not increase crime. We have some laws on the books at the federal level that make it a crime to be in the presence of somebody. They're called the crack house rules. We did them in the 80s when we were doing the war on drugs, and dealers were setting up houses where people could go and buy crack and buy cocaine, et cetera, et cetera. And so at the federal level, we implemented these laws. They were never meant to be for people who were trying to keep people safe.
Medical professionals.
However, our U.S. Attorney General has decided to interpret them in that way. And so We have, so one of the laws, one of the obstacles is that it would be closed down because it was in violation of the crack house rule. We also have some licensing laws on our books for people who would be in the presence or would be helping people who were using. We need to change them so to ensure that nobody in the medical profession would be harmed because they were trying to provide a safe place for people.
Right.
So we have some work to do at the state level, and we have some work to do at the federal level. I think from what we're seeing, that at the federal in the federal space, we would have to go to court and have a court decide whether or not that interpretation of the crack house rule was in fact valid. And they did do it in Philadelphia, the Philadelphia district, and the judge said in no way, shape, or form was that ever the intention of these laws. So they are moving ahead to open a safe consumption site.
And do you see it as a hard sell to, just the public in general, or do you think people are kind of coming around to the idea that this is an issue we have to sort of do whatever we can to address?
I think it is a very hard sell. And the language that we've been working on is very clear that it needs to be in a community that is willing to do a pilot. So there would be nothing in any bill that we filed that would suggest that you could put one anywhere regardless.
Right.
You definitely need community buy-in, and places that are interested in, we would do it through a pilot program. So ideally you would open 3 of these across the state, and you would on a pilot, and then you would gather data and information and see how they are working, and if they're keeping people safe, and if they're getting people into care that they need. But you would only be able to do it in a community that was willing to have a pilot, because
Right.
Otherwise it will fail.
Yeah.
And we don't want it to fail. We want to see if it works. And so it would be very clear that it would have to be a community who is willing to try it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and then, like you said, if it's successful, success breeds success. So hopefully,
That's right. And
people would
can
realize
see-
this is not the boogeyman they think it
right,
is.
Exactly.
So I know we've already kind of gone quite a bit outside the original scope, of this bill, but it seems like there's a lot going on. Are any other ongoing or upcoming kind of, measures to talk about, substance abuse that you think the public should know about?
Well, we are addressing Section 35. Section 35 is a section of a chapter of the Mass General Laws that allows people who have a substance use disorder to be held for somebody to petition a court to hold them for 72 hours.
Right.
But it has to be done through a court, and we have some language that we're working very hard on that would say that if you are in a treatment under Section 35, that treatment could not be in a correctional facility. Right now, one of our biggest treatment facilities is MASAC, and that's part of Department of Corrections, and we feel very strongly that nobody who is held on a Section 35 belongs in any place but a treatment facility and should not be part of a prison.
Right.
And
I mean, that just sort of disincentivizes people from putting their loved ones, if they're
well,
going to
it's
be
and it's a very different model. I mean, with all due respect to people in corrections are doing corrections. They're not doing health care.
Right.
And this is a healthcare issue, and it belongs. We would never, ever think about taking somebody who had a cardiac problem, and put them in a treatment facility that was in a prison. Everybody would look at you like you had 17 heads. But we do that with people who have substance use disorder. So we're working very hard to change those laws and ensure that they go to a certified treatment facility. We also have a new law in the books that was part of the opioid bill that we did last session that requires all treatment facilities to offer people medication-assisted treatment, which is known to be a great start for people who are in recovery.
Yeah.
So those are a couple things that we're doing, and we have some money for screening, and we've also put some money in for community behavioral health development so that we can start to address the issues of stigma and also of screening people who may be at risk of having a substance use.
Right. So I think, just to recap a little bit, the big takeaway is this sort of change in viewpoint of, drug use as a criminal behavior to a medical condition. It should be treated as such, help people rather than just punish them.
Right.
Well, seems like there's a lot going on. I hope it all works out because I think we all benefit from this.
Yep.
It's not political at all. So
Nope.
I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your views and your thoughts about what's going on.
Well, thanks, and thanks for having me, and thank you to BCAT for your interest in this issue. It's really important. It's important to everybody.
We agree.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. So there you have it from State Senator Cindy Freedman. We go now to my interview with Middlesex County Sheriff Peter Koutoujian about his office's Restoration Center, the efforts to keep people out of the legal system, and to offer them treatment once they are in. I'm now joined by Middlesex Sheriff Peter Koutoujian, who's here to talk about his office and how it has evolved in this issue over time and what they've been doing. It's been a lot of interesting things, so I'm looking forward to jumping right into the discussion. Peter, thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much, Rich. Great to be here.
So one of the things that I know that has been a long time project for your office is this Restoration Center. Can you sort of talk about kind of how it came about and what its function is?
Yeah, it's been a long movement for many years now in not just policing, but also in corrections, moving away from the warrior mentality and into the guardian mentality, understanding that with regard to especially the issues of mental health and substance use disorder, that we cannot arrest and incarcerate our way into success.
Right.
That we have to treat these as the diseases that they are. And so this has been, this is maybe not the culmination, but it is another piece in this puzzle. As you know, we're doing a lot of that type of work in the Middlesex Sheriff's Office on medication-assisted treatment and the reentry, and just an amazing amount of work for which we're receiving a lot of national attention. But what's really important is that police have tools in their tool belt. So often when police go to an incident, sometimes in order to not deflate, but to remove the problem from that conflict, they have to make an arrest.
Right.
And sometimes you don't really want to have to make an arrest, but it's the only tool they have. Those that have mental health and substance use disorders are clogging up our emergency rooms and our police departments and our correctional facilities. So the Restoration Center is built on a model that I have visited in San Antonio, Texas, and a few other models where you would have a center that would be able to evaluate and treat people that were in mental health crisis or substance use disorder crisis, even for detoxification. A place that police could actually bring individuals after engaging with them on the street, bring them to the Restoration Center instead of bringing them either to a hospital and staying in the emergency room for an average of 9 hours, I think is that time, and being removed from the street and costing that town a lot of money,
right.
Or bringing them back to the police departments and having to incarcerate them and arrest them, right? And then we get them. We've just come to realize that if we can get them the treatment that they need, pre-arrest especially, so that we don't even have to have them entered into the justice system. Right. If we can get them that treatment, then we can avoid all of that and and we will have done a great service to our taxpayers, but particularly to that individual, that family, and our local communities.
No, I'm gathering this is sort of based on the idea of, like you said, you're looking at it more as addiction as a disease rather than just wanton criminal behavior.
Right.
So is that sort of like the change of philosophy that we're seeing, is that, rather than, just saying, well, you committed a crime because it is, a crime to possess and use these substances rather than more focused on, well, let's see if we can sort of like help you.
Yeah, that's right. Listen, 80% of our population have a substance use disorder when they come in. We actually have to physically, medically detox 42% of our population as they come in our door. So imagine you're so sick on drugs or alcohol, or such an addict at that point, that when you're incarcerated, when you come to us, we have to medically detox you, almost half of our population, over 2,000 people a year. That's showing a real illness that's out there. And we have realized that, just incarcerating people hasn't been working at all. And It's costing a lot more money. It's not having any good outcomes. And it's not working at all. So we've made that shift, and it's been working quite well, actually. And this restoration center is the ability to have police drop that individual off to our care, or at the restoration center, it wouldn't be the Middlesex Sheriff's Office, but with Cindy Freedman and Representative Gordon, then to have them evaluated, treated there, instead of having to go to the other places. And what's really interesting is, you're not, again, you're diverting them from the justice system, one, so that they don't have to become justice involved, which can, especially with substance use disorder and mental illness, can bring worse outcomes. You're actually diverting them to the resources that they need as they leave our facility, which is critically important and something we don't do as a community or as a society well.
Right, that long-term care. Like
That's
saying,
right.
Like, all right, we've got you initially, through that, detox stage, but now it's also time
It's
for
a cycle. It's a cycle. You
recovery
come, you get
program.
arrested. You get arrested. 50% of our population also have mental health issues. So these restoration centers actually treat both. The fact is, I know people. I know people inside my facility that have been incarcerated only because they're an addict or an alcoholic, or only because they have mental health issues. The criminality is completely wrapped around that disease. And it doesn't mean that there aren't repercussions. Maybe justice-involved repercussions as a way to help drive behavior or correct behavior. But the fact is, it's a sad day when you see people that are in jail only because they have a mental health issue. It's just, honestly, it's a really sad thing for me to see. And I don't have any choice. They're sent to me. I house them.
Right.
I try to treat them. And then I also know that as much as I can treat them with good programs and good care, when I turn them out, I don't know what's waiting for them out there, and our communities don't do a good job of welcoming them back with the programming and the resources that they need to be successful, either before they come to us, so they don't have to come to us in the first place, or when they leave, so they don't have to return to us.
And I imagine that, not having, going to the restoration center rather than being incarcerated, rather than being brought into the legal system, helps because they also don't have that on their record now.
That's right. Again, just having a record, even if you're not incarcerated, really messes up the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
It precludes you from opportunities. That's a problem for people. You know what's also important, though, Rich, is when police actually bring someone to a restoration center, as opposed to having to make that arrest, their relationship with that family is significantly improved. So a lot of times there'll be someone with a mental health disorder or a substance use disorder, and it's a family, and that the individual is acting out in the family setting. So it becomes a domestic situation that can get out of hand and become very dangerous. The only tool was to actually have that person arrested and brought to jail, and then have that, to get them out of that scene. Now they can actually get them out into the help that they need. So the relationship, not just with that individual, but with the family at that home, is much better, so that instead of the police having to come and the family, being angry because they know the police are going to make, so there's a hostile relationship.
Right.
Now there's a much more a positive engagement with police, because they know they're there to help them, as opposed to just arrest their loved one as the only option they have.
Right, they're seen as bringing help and treatment, maybe.
That's right.
rather than
That's right.
just-
Part of the solution, not part of the problem, almost.
Right, and then a couple last points, because I know you are short on time here. We have the Restoration Center. I know there's been a lot kind of happening the last couple of years. Looking down, the road a little bit, what are some other kind of changes that you see might be coming?
We're already still doing great work with our dedicated incarcerated military veterans unit, our Humvee housing unit for military veterans. It's having amazing success. We're still the only one in the state, sadly, and have been referred to as best practices by a number of national publications. We've still got our young adult offender unit, People Achieving Change Together, for 18 through 24-year-olds, that have the highest rates of recidivism, that have the worst outcomes for justice involvement. that has been working remarkably well. We do it with the Vera Institute. We've got our medication-assisted treatment program, allowing those that come into our facility that have a medication-assisted treatment prescription to be able to maintain that or induce them before they get out, which will save a lot of people from overdose death because it's the highest rate. We are doing the Restoration Center. We've been working on a project with Arnold Ventures or Arnold Foundation on a data-driven justice initiative. We've got another program going on with Medicaid right now, Behavioral Health Justice Initiative, where we're actually assigning navigators, those people that will support those individuals as they leave our care, for those that leave with mental health issues, to assign someone to help them navigate their life back on the outside. A lot of stuff going on in the Middlesex Sheriff's Office. It's a very exciting time, and it's even more exciting because all this work has been recognized on such a national level that in just a couple of weeks, I will become the president of the Major County Sheriffs of America, which is a national organization representing about 120 million constituents across the country, the largest sheriff's offices across the country. They chose me to be their president because I think of the work that we're doing in the Middlesex Sheriff's Office.
Yeah, that actually leads me into my final question was just, I know that, you sort of on the forefront of this issue. Do you see that you're getting a lot of response from other counties around the state or other departments around the country? And what are you sort of seeing as far as, what the future might hold for, the rest of the country in this regard?
That's a great question. So we have been leading this fight with medication-assisted treatment for 5 years especially. The program, we've got all sorts of data. We can show what's working, what's not working. It has been a remarkable experience. Now, because of this work and the other work that we're doing, we've had visitors from across this nation, like routinely every week we will have a group from Arizona or Texas or Washington State or Washington, D.C. or Florida. Just now we're having a group from Florida come in because of the programs we're running. And then they go back out and they replicate it. Also, myself and my staff have been routinely now called to speak, whether it's at the White House or in Washington, D.C. I'm going to speak to the Sheriff's Association of Indiana pretty soon, because what's important about is this. You can speak about these programs in a clinical fashion because they're really clinical, and policy driven. But other sheriffs, you can have someone that's the clinician in these things and they'll speak about it, but other sheriffs won't listen to them as much as they'll listen to a colleague. Sure. So as a sheriff, they can also speak about, our numbers and our data and the reasons why we're doing these things and saying, we can do this, it's acceptable to do this, and we've had success in doing this, makes a difference. And so it's a nice problem to have. The travel has been much more difficult on myself and my family, quite honestly.
Sure.
But my role is too important to say I can't come out anymore, because I know I can be the difference between other states, across this country, taking on new initiatives that can change the way we're doing corrections and bring a lot of, not just savings to taxpayers, but a lot more safety to their communities and helping not just individuals, but their families as well. It's something very powerful. And in the Middlesex Sheriff's Office, we understand we're at the forefront of this nationally. It's an exciting time, and we know we have a lot of work to do to bring what we're learning here and what we're innovating and driving here, and bring that out to the rest of the country. It's an exciting time. It's a great opportunity. It's honestly a great responsibility as well.
Well, I think it's good work. I think people, in this situation kind of need all the help that they can get, and it's, positive to see, assistance rather than just sort of, what was happening before.
That's right.
And I appreciate you coming in and taking some time to explain to us what you've been doing over there.
My pleasure, Rich. Great to be with you, sir.
Thank you very much. Finally this month, we go to State Rep Ken Gordon about the big picture and the change of philosophy of how to treat people suffering from addiction, what has been done, and what can happen in the future. I'm now joined by State Rep Ken Gordon, who has come in to share his views on what the state is doing and what more can be done to help those who are suffering some addiction and possibly will be better off out of the legal system. Ken, thanks for coming in.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Rich. This is an important topic that we deal with all the time on the State House and have been dealing with for quite a number of years. So I'm glad that you bring it up now to talk to the people of Burlington about it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to start off in general, your thoughts currently of, how the state approaches, people in this situation,
Well, currently, let's say sort of historically,
Okay.
Traditionally, we look at, when we used to have the sort of an approach of just say no to drugs, and we were looking at this from a punitive point of view at this point. Someone got caught in a possession of drugs, including marijuana at that point, they would be taken into police custody and they'd go before a judge and arraigned, and they'd be in a system that would be inefficient, expensive, and didn't get them off the drugs that they were using. So
Right.
beginning a few years ago, we took a look at it and realized how inefficient that is. And that is the legislature and also the administration, the governor, the current governor, and Governor Patrick before him. And we really believe now that the best way to address criminal justice as well as mental health and substance abuse issues is to look at treatment rather than incarceration, except for the most severe of cases. Generally, if people are treated, the amount of recidivism goes down. They begin to recover and become productive members of our society.
And what are some of the current things that are being looked at that you think are, a step in the right direction?
Currently, and I'll start with a program that I've been involved with Senator Cindy Freedman. I know that she's been on the show
Right.
to talk about this as well. And I'm really proud that out of a bill that she filed in the last session, we are engaged together as commissioners on the Middlesex County Restoration Commission. And she probably talked about that a little bit.
Yep.
But she is the Senate, as she filed the bill, she is the Senate representative on this commission, and I am the representative from the House. Coincidentally, we both represent Burlington, so
Right.
it's been a great partnership on it. And so what we do is we're exploring the best way in which we can provide a facility here in Middlesex County to address this crisis in what we call Intercept Zero, which is that along this criminal justice system, along the trail, there are many ways where people they intercept with law enforcement. Intercept 1 is when a police officer arrives. Intercept 0 is even before that.
Okay.
Okay, so getting people the treatment that they need and making it more accessible is a way that we can get them right at the 0 level, right? If not, at Intercept 1, that would be the police officer gets there and they have a place to bring someone who's really either under the influence of a substance abuse issue, or they're dealing with a mental health crisis or situation. And the police officer realizes, well, right now, currently, I can either take them to court, to jail, where they end up in court,
Right.
book them and put them through the legal process, or I can take them to the emergency room. That's a very expensive proposition, and they better be used for someone suffering from an illness or an injury that requires that more traditional emergency room treatment. In fact, both of them are a very expensive way to deal with
Sure.
the situation. And so this would be a center where we could bring people as an alternative so that they can, first of all, receive detox treatment, make sure that they're off of whatever, if it's a substance abuse issue. And about 80% of people who are dealing with a substance abuse issue are also dealing with a mental health issue at the same time. And so we get control of the substance abuse right away, and then we talk to them about getting treatment as an alternative to entering this criminal justice system.
Now, one of the things that the bill addresses, that Senator Friedman has filed, is that even when they're in the system, if they relapse, they're in rehab but they have a relapse, I guess currently that sort of would trigger like more legal action.
Right.
But this would sort of recognize that relapse is kind of part of the process.
Exactly. So this is a bill that she filed along with Representative Ruth Ball on the House side that I co-sponsored. And it's very important to recognize human nature in all of this. And we shouldn't be battling what we know would happen, which is that it sometimes, with the best of intentions, someone who has a history of substance abuse just may relapse.
Right.
Should that ruin all the good work that's occurred up to that point to get them, down the road to recovery and send them right back into the system that we were trying to keep them out of in the first place? Or should we look at that and recognizing that you may need more treatment now? You may not have progressed as far as we thought, and so we'll give you the help that you need. we look at it in other situations in our community, in our society, where someone just stumbles, and should we punish them by making them go all the way to the beginning of a system that was working for them, or just allow them to move forward? So that's what this bill would do.
Right. From conversations, because obviously in this field of news, you talk a lot with a lot of different people, and part of some of the people I've talked to are, recovering addicts, people who are really working on this opioid crisis.
Right.
And, I think there's a push to kind of educate the public that substance abuse is not always like a decision. It's like almost
Right.
like an illness that people who are, are addicted are kind of going with, and that it should be approached, by society more as helping somebody with an illness rather than punishing somebody for breaking the law.
Right, it's not a choice. If you ask anyone who is suffering from a substance abuse issue, or people that are dealing with alcoholism, and you say, is this a life you would choose? Is this a condition that you would choose? They
Right.
would say no. And if you just talk to them as if it's a choice and say, look, don't take that again because, your kids are depending on you, your family's depending on you, just don't do it. If it was that easy,
Right.
right? But it's not, because it's not a choice. It's a condition, a mental health condition that we have to, and we are addressing. Senator Freedman has spent her career, her public career, really addressing this issue. And it's because of the work that she's done that a lot of these advances have occurred in the last 2 or 3 years. And to her credit, this Restoration Center work that we've done now, we're on our 3rd year of doing it, is out of the bill that she filed, as I said. And many of these ideas have come out of her office, of Senator Friedman and her office. And so it's great to have leadership like that. It's great for me as a representative from Burlington to be able to rely on my Senate partner
Right.
to have this deep understanding of this issue.
Now, is there, you kind of just touched on it with, some of the work that she's been doing, but, this kind of change in the view of, politicians and other, even like
Right.
law enforcement, of, this new approach of treating people as an illness rather than as a crime. Do you see, like, any moment in your career that sort of made it kind of like click for you? Was there an inspiration that this became an issue that you're, sort of passionate about?
Really, it was what we really just discussed is in our lives, we've known people who have been affected by alcoholism or substance abuse issues, and starting with that. And as I said, so we know that this isn't a choice. This is not a path that they chose to go down. We know that that's a particular person didn't want to lose their driver's license. We know that having lost it once, they don't want to put themselves in a position where they might lose it again, and yet it happens.
Right.
And you can't just have that conversation with them about why'd you do that? Because if they could control it, they would. And so many times you realize people are just looking for help. Sometimes it's a little bit of understanding. And a system that depends on punishment isn't really effective for someone like that because they're really punishing themselves all along, right? And so you talk to a few people and you do begin to get that understanding, and you realize how important these issues are to address. And you realize that there are instances where someone is dealing with a mental health issue. So again, their conduct, from the outside, it may be simple to say, you committed that act, and here's, some people say we're a country of laws.
Right.
That's true, we are a country of laws. But sometimes there's a reason why people make mistakes and they act inconsistent with a law, where if it's, for example, a minor drug offense, yeah, that's true. You possessed a certain drug. That's true. But is the best way to deal with that to just put you in a position where you're probably going to do it again? I think you may know that in Middlesex County, 80% of people incarcerated here are dealing with substance abuse issues, and a majority with mental health issues. And so that's not just a coincidence. People are making choices because of these conditions that they're suffering from, and we can address that.
And I think, one of the, that makes it even more of a difficult cycle to break is you get the conviction for a drug use. That kind of goes on your record, becomes harder to get other opportunities moving forward. So to circumvent that issue would probably, also help people.
We passed a bill into law last session, for example, that it used to be that someone coming out of prison with any drug offense can't get their license back unless they satisfy these major insurmountable obstacles. They had to pay fees that they never could pay because they just got out of prison.
Right.
So they're trying to get a job. And in order to get to their job, they have to pay $500 to $800 to fill out applications or go through red tape, government red tape that makes it impossible. So now their circle of opportunity to get a job is basically where they can walk. And if you live in the suburbs and you're in that situation, that's not going to work. And it's very difficult to get to public transportation, so it's not going to work. So we looked at instances like that. What are the obstacles that we're placing in their path that we really could, by looking at this and be a little more humane about it, we might be able to create success stories rather than recidivism.
Right. So moving forward, what are some of the other things that you're kind of seeing, possibly in the pipeline, other additional, legislation or actions or projects?
Well, in this area, again, it's the Restoration Center is important. It's important to me being involved in that commission because I think that will really help bring a lot of people that aren't committing violent crimes. They're not engaged in victim-oriented crimes. They're just essentially, they're looking for help. It's the person that may be in the library or the Dunkin' Donuts that someone else notices, that they've been here for quite a while. We can bring them for help and do that. And so that's important. And we're always looking at ways, the citizens through the ballot initiative legalized marijuana.
Right.
So, and we created, we took the criminality out of possessions of small amounts of marijuana as well. So, that's gone. And, through that and other ways, through, here in Middlesex County especially, there's a program called Matador, which is a way in which we treat people who have been dependent on drugs when they get into prison. When they're in prison, they don't have access to drugs, they come out clean. But if someone's been relying
forcibly
on,
clean.
Sorry?
I said forcibly clean,
Yeah,
so it's maybe not the treatment.
That's right. So they come out and they're ready to get back in their society, or they're ready, and they go back into the same community that they come from. And at that point, even if they want to stay sober, as they have been, it's very difficult for them to do because they're around that. So this is medically assisted treatment, MAT, and we find it's been tremendously successful. In fact, this Middlesex County program is seen as the model for the nation. A majority of the people who had been incarcerated who go through this medically assisted treatment stay clean. And the recidivism has come way, way down. They don't go back into prison, which is our goal.
And one of the last things I wanted to touch upon was, I know the state does have some, or I believe the state has some clean needle exchange programs that people can engage in. What are your thoughts on that? And then further, safe injection sites.
Yeah.
Both as a way, but both as a way to give people a place, to be in a safe environment, but also as a way to have that sort of maybe first contact between, the addictee and people who might be able to offer treatment.
For those reasons, you're framing the question in the way that invites the answer that I really think is the right answer, which is we can't fight human nature. We can't penalize these instances where people have gotten into the use of drugs. Many times now, when we talk about opiates, many people have gotten into some of these drugs like heroin because it started with prescription medication for pain from surgeries and things like that, and then they end up getting hooked on the opiates, and then the opiates are too expensive after a while, and heroin becomes an alternative, and things like that can happen. And so people are in this cycle, again, not by choice, but by circumstance, and oftentimes circumstance that was not within their control. And so if we look at them as people who really need treatment, then these sites, I think, become important. It's a safe place. We don't want to have people die. I mean, we don't want to lose people. And if that's our goal, and we start there, then the question is, are these places safer for both the users and society altogether? Because is it safer that we can help people to come off of that cycle of drugs, and therefore we have contact with people who are engaged that way. Is that safer for everyone? And certainly it's safer for the people who are using. It's important that when we're talking about mental illness, it's not everybody who's mentally ill gets into this cycle at all.
Right, of course.
It's that many people who are in this cycle are affected by mental illness. It's the other way. It's that direction only that we're really talking about.
And last thing, unless you have some points that we haven't touched upon, with things like needle exchange or safe injection sites, do you foresee any kind of difficulty with, Massachusetts versus the federal government? I know federal laws, often play into these sort of issues.
Yeah, and it's always, right now it's very unpredictable. Many of our marijuana laws, I know, have been questioned
Right.
On the federal side. We're in Massachusetts. We're going to do the best that we can to protect our community, and if we find that we need to do things to provide more protections or to do things a little differently, we're going to use our judgment and do what the people of Massachusetts elected us to do. And to the extent that the federal government's work is inconsistent with that, well, we'll do the best that we can to provide the protections for our citizens.
All right. Well, that is all the questions that I had, unless there's some points that I missed that you think are important for people to know.
No, it's been really an honor to represent Burlington and Bedford and Precinct 3 in Wilmington in the legislature. And it's also wonderful, as I said before, to be able to partner with people who have these, these genuine focuses, and Senator Freedman has had this as her focus. You know that I came into the legislature as an employment lawyer and had this really a deep understanding of the things that affect employment and all, and I've learned a lot in the years that I've been there about other issues. And with Senator Freedman, this is something she absorbs these issues on the mental health and substance abuse areas so well that it's been a great team. So I appreciate that Burlington has that representation in the State House as a result of that partnership.
And I appreciate that representation coming in and sharing their views about what's going on, and with our viewers. So
thank you very much, Rich.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
So there you have it, a deep dive on the change in philosophy of treating people with suffering from addiction as patients rather than simply as criminals. I'd like to thank my guests this month, State Senator Cindy Freedman, Middlesex County Sheriff Peter Koutoujian, and State Rep Ken Gordon. I'd also like to thank all of you for watching. We'll be back next month with another edition of BNEWS In Depth, so stay tuned.